we center them as legitimate historical actors and as subjects in their own right for study. And so the way I thought I would approach this is to actually look at two black loyalists and talk about their life story and how they enter the narrative that has been silenced. So, of course, the first one I want to talk about is Prince Williams. Now before we go any further, this is class time now. By a show of hands, how many of you know about Prince Williams? In any way, shape, or form? Prince Williams. I thought you might know about him because we have a school, Jordan Prince Williams, named after him. But what I find most interesting is that's like all the people know. It's like his narrative stops at the name of the school. And so even the most prominent, perhaps, black loyalist is still kind of silenced. And so what I want to do is introduce the Prince Williams that I've come to learn about. Prince Williams, his story actually doesn't begin in the Bahamas. It starts in colonial Georgia, where he was in fact born free. But was later, this actually, his words, in the Loyalist Claims Commission records, I found Prince Williams actually said he was cheated out of his freedom and sold to an American. And although his slave owner is never mentioned by name, Williams' account reveals that he was forced to serve this man when the British troops came to Georgia. And then it goes on to say that he fled into the British. He found freedom, ironically, with the British. But he served under General Provost in Savannah for 6 years. The next time we hear about Prince Williams, he is actually evacuating from St. Augustine in East Florida for the Bahamas, along with Sharper Morris, another black loyalist. And we don't know the exact date, but it's sometime in the 1780s, the early 1780s. And we know that because we have this corroborating evidence that by 1785, he appears in a notice in the Bahamas Gazette as a runaway. Okay, now this is the fascinating story. Remember, he was born free. He gets freedom taken away from him, and then he finds freedom again by escaping to the British lines. So he's born free, he loses his freedom, he gains it back, and then he comes to the Bahamas and his freedom is challenged again. Why do I say that? Because he shows up in this escapee advertisement as a runaway slave. So what I'm trying to show you and illustrate with Prince William's case here is that freedom was tenuous in the Bahamas. Freedom was often very tenuous for black loyalists. They often slipped between freedom and unfreedom. Okay, and it says a lot about the kind of society that they entered. A slave-holding society that was also non-plantation or decayed in nature. No, it was not Jamaica, the sugar complex system. It was not certainly Saint-Domingue. It was not Barbados or Antigua. It was a non-plantation slave-holding society. But I will tell you that our slave codes mirrored Barbados and Virginia. And so there were regulations regarding slavery. And there were slaveholders who at every chance and opportunity attempted to assert control over the lives and bodies of these black loyalists. And Prince Williams is an unfortunate victim of this system. Luckily, or fortuitously, Williams is able to gain complete freedom. And we know that because, of course, he shows up in our records in 1801 as being one of the purchasers of the property that would later be where Bethel Baptist is built. And that document, of course, is the CO papers in 1801. And of course, this is important because remember, a slave couldn't purchase property. And so, you know, the fact that he is listed as someone who is the purchaser of his property speaks to the fact that he has managed to get his freedom. It was a hard-fought battle, I believe, but I believe he is able to do that by 1801. He writes about this in a petition, actually, in 1826. And again, in 1826, Prince William is embroiled in another conflict, this time over the church and control of the church. And in fact, he's locked out of his building, Bethel Baptist, by the trustees, and the trustees actually go to the governor. Okay, so there's this conspiracy with the trustees and the governor. In any event, what is really a powerful statement of freedom and civil liberty is Prince William petitions the governor to rightfully have his church restored to him. And he has a petition that is signed by over 400 members. And so again, what I'm trying to show you, there is a long struggle for freedom. And it suggests that there's a degree of political acumen that is acquired by Prince Williams in the course of his life, both in colonial Georgia and also here in the Bahamas. Very important. Let's look at the next black loyalist. And I chose this particular case because I want to highlight that, black loyalists were all men. Most of the ones that we know about, leading religious figures, are, of course, men. But I want you to know that it's very important that we insert into the narrative a gender analysis. And so I want to talk about Sarah Moultrie. On April 14, 1788, in the colonial records, the CO papers, a Negro woman calling herself Sarah Moultrie and her child appeared before Dunmore's Negro court, where they were pronounced free by the Receiver General and 2 other magistrates. John Struder, who is a white claimant, he's coming in and he's claiming that this woman, Sarah Moultrie, is actually his slave. And so in his affidavit he writes, at the time of the evacuation of Charleston, South Carolina by His Majesty's troops in 1782, this woman, Sarah, was in fact a slave. She goes to St. Augustine, and her owner apparently is a woman named Ann Nelson, who claims that this is her lawful property. But on moving to the Bahamas, Ann Nelson brought Sarah with her. And in fact, she sold Sarah, and listen to the language, as a free gift to Ann Nelson. And this is interesting because Anne is going to go to England, and so she sells Sarah to Struder, and Struder in turn sells Sarah to Hugh Dean. So, Sarah is sold like 3 or 4 times to different slaveholders. And she's treated as if she's a free gift. She's treated as she's chattel. And yet, John Struder unwittingly, says something about Sarah's struggle for freedom. In fact, he says that Sarah says she is free. Well, how does Sarah show that she's free? She runs away more than once. And she escapes to Lord Dunmore's plantation, where she manages to stay there for a while and work as a cook until her case is brought before Dunmore's court. And it's in that court that she is finally declared free. So again, like Prince Williams, you see this long struggle to achieve freedom. And I'll add one last caveat to this story. She's in fact kidnapped unlawfully by John Struder at one point from Dunmore's plantation. And Struder, he has no inkling of the legality or illegality of what he's doing. He thinks that this woman is his possession, and so he's willing to go above the law even and kidnap Sarah in order to possess her as his chattel. So once again, this is, I think, a very powerful story of one woman's effort to claim freedom legitimately. Let's move on. Now I want to talk about Lord Dunmore a little bit more. Dunmore obviously figures prominently in our history. He was a governor for a decade. He had an acrimonious relationship with the local Loyalists that arrived here. He had a lot of difficulty, particularly with William Riley, who was later to be Attorney General of the Bahamas. William Riley was probably his biggest opponent during this period. But what is most significant is that, for black Loyalists, he might have even been portrayed as a liberator for them. Because on November 7th, 1785, he issues this proclamation in Virginia. And it reads, "And I do hereby further declare all indentured servants, Negroes or others, appertaining to rebels, free, that are able and willing to bear arms, they joining his